Hello, Duke basketball fans. Welcome to the first off-season edition of the Duke Basketball Report podcast. I am here. I am your host this week, Jason Evans. I'm glad to speak to all of you. And I am joined, as always, by my compadres, Samuel Klein and Donald Wine. Donald, tell us where you are this evening.
I am back in my home in Washington, D.C. It's been a couple weeks since I have spoken with you guys. I'm glad to hear your voice. But this also is a historical podcast. It's the first time we've had to talk about a season that Duke didn't win the national championship, and I don't know how to start.
It is difficult. But it's a season that, and we'll reflect on it in a moment, it's a season that unquestionably we all feel like was a tremendous success. We enjoyed it so much, even if it didn't end with Duke on a winning streak, which, only really one of the really good teams gets to claim that. The other guy in our podcast, the third member, the third wheel, Sam Klein. You in Denver tonight, Sam?
I am home in my apartment in my normal recording space. To echo Donald, it's also excellent to hear from you guys. I know that we haven't recorded in a while. Duke obviously lost, and then the tournament was still going on, but there were a lot of kind of news items that we're working on, and we picked this day to start recording again. And it seems like that is going to actually work out really nicely for us as far as analyzing what happened and what's coming up soon.
Yeah, so for folks out there wondering, I'm sure there are many of you who are saying, why on earth did they not record a podcast for a couple of weeks? We kept on thinking we were about to do one, and then something important would happen. Oh, wait, the national championship game's happening. Oh, wait, Grayson Allen's going to come back to Duke. And then we kept on saying, well, let's wait till sort of the dust settles, and it feels a little bit like it hasn't completely settled, but
we actually, I was going to say, on that point, I don't know if you guys look at our SoundCloud page as far as the notifications that we get, but the account that we set up on our SoundCloud page had I can't remember the user's name, but one of our listeners left us a message that was like, "Hey guys, where you been? Been waiting to hear from you." So shout out to that guy. I know he had a Duke related SoundCloud account name, but I can't remember at the moment what it was. But hey, we're back. So so here you are.
Nice to be missed.
Yes,
and let's start. Let's start with sort of the news. We're recording this on Sunday evening, the 10th of April. The news just came out today, and I think for a lot of us who are close to the program, who've been reading the tea leaves, hearing the rumblings and the such, the news was not a shock. We were just talking a moment ago about Duke's roster. Derek Thornton announced today that or Duke announced for him that he will be transferring. We don't know where he's going to be going. Obviously, wish him, all the luck in the world. It's a bummer that we won't continue to have him in a Duke uniform, but the roster for next year, loaded to bear. The moment the season ends, everyone starts looking to preseason predictions for 2017-18, 2016-17. And the predictions for 2016-17 say the Duke Blue Devils will be not near the top, not one of, but the team to beat. Sam, I'm going to come to you first. Give me your reflections on give me your predictions on the roster that will be Grayson Allen, Emil Jefferson, Luke Kennard, Matt Jones, Harry Giles, Jason Tatum, Frank Jackson, Chase Jeter, and possibly Marcus Bolden, and Javier Delorier and Jack White. And it's a ridiculous roster.
Yeah, it's my first impression is that it's a very big roster, don't you think?
It is. We're going to have lots of size.
Yeah, a lot of size, but I think one of the things that was missing from this from this Duke team this year, and which may continue to be a problem next year, is the point guard and ball handling and distribution. So that may still be a concern for next year. I know that a lot of folks want to talk about Frank Jackson as maybe taking over that point guard spot, but it doesn't seem like he's gonna do it in the way that people maybe thought Derek Thornton should have or could have this past season. But that being said, they obviously have lead guards in Jackson and Grayson Allen who are able to distribute a little bit, and guys who can score from a lot of places on the court, including, if he's healthy, Harry Giles, who's going to be kind of a monster for Duke. It seems like in the last few weeks, especially given his performance in the McDonald's game, that people are a lot higher on Frank Jackson. That I guess his stock has been climbing sort of steadily throughout the season, and that's really great to see. Seeing that Thornton is going to transfer, you would think that means that Frank Jackson gets a lot more of the minutes. And I think that, depending on how those practices and scrimmages had played out this coming fall, you could have envisioned a season where Derek Thornton continues to play something like 25 to 30 minutes a game, and Frank Jackson doesn't really get into the rotation because he might have been like that ninth guy or that eighth guy. Now, he might be a starter, but he's almost certainly going to play a lot of minutes, and so I'm excited to see that. And obviously, I touched on Giles, who's going to be phenomenal again if he's healthy. And then Jason Tatum, who has also performed well here in the late season, in like the showcase season, I guess, if you will, for the high school seniors. So I'm very excited to see what's going to happen. And then, of course, we got, I think the best piece of news that Duke got recently is that Grayson Allen is coming back to school. And I think there was a little bit of speculation about, is his draft stock going to fall? Is it falling? Maybe he's a second rounder now, which means he doesn't get guaranteed money, et cetera, et cetera. So I think you could really argue either way for whether or not he should come back. I think that a lot of fans, though, myself included, were kind of saying, all right, he had an incredible season. He outworked and outproduced anything that we could have reasonably expected for him. And for that, you would think that he might be rewarded with a nice draft spot. So if he comes back, great. He's going to be an amazing player for us next year. And if he doesn't, then farewell. He was a decisive factor in a national championship game, but he's back. So I think that Grayson Allen's going to be the leader of this team. Emil Jefferson might be the. Oh, go ahead.
I was going to say, let me jump in because you were talking about point guard. I'm of the belief that Grayson Allen came back to play point guard. I think that given his size, given his size, his NBA position is probably as a point guard, and so how better to show the NBA if his stock was mid-20s, late 20s in terms of draft position, how better to move that stock up? He's not going to move that stock up by scoring more or shooting more. Because he's first of all, he's not going to have as many opportunities to shoot next year because there's so many more weapons on the team. But he already showed he can score as well as anyone in the entire college game. He's going to move that stock up by showing that he can be a distributor, that he can get even more assists, that he can handle ball handling duties at the NBA level. And I think that's what he's come back specifically to do. I agree with you that the loss of Derek Thornton elevates Frank Jackson a little bit. And by the way, I sort of think Derek Thornton may have left because Frank Jackson scared him off a bit. I mean, the class of 2016, these guys that are about to join Duke, this is considered one of the best classes of high school basketball that we've seen in many, many years. And Duke is just loaded with these guys. I think any prediction that Frank Jackson, you were saying that, he may only play 10 or 15 minutes a game. Frank Jackson's going to play 20 plus minutes a game. Frank Jackson's going to be an incredible player for Duke. But I think that Grayson Allen is going to get most of the minutes at the so-called point guard. I mean, look, at Duke, there aren't really positions. We saw last year there were a number of guys. Even when Derek Thornton was on the floor, there were times that Allen or Jones brought the ball up and sort of started the play. Heck, Brandon Ingram did it sometimes. Hey, Donald, we've been leaving you out for a little bit. Give me a little bit on what you see coming forward for Duke next year.
So the first thing you kind of notice when you take a look at, what we're losing next year. We're obviously graduating Marshall Plumlee. We lose Brandon Ingram to the draft, and now with Thornton with the transfer. There's also this thing going around on whether or not Sean Obi's knees are capable to help him perform next year. Well, I guess that's something that we'll kind of look at over the next couple of weeks and see what news actually comes out of that. But rumors have been flying either way about whether or not he would be able to continue to play. But there's also the fact that I think this might be the first time in a long time that a team loses a guy who is a surefire first or second pick in the NBA draft and gets better because our incoming class is just that good. And if you add hopefully a Marcus Bolden, who you would think with Thornton transferring, while that is something that we did not wish to see, that does open up a scholarship spot for Marcus Bolden. And
by the way, I'll get back to you in half a second. It's almost, if you think about Duke 2016-17 versus Duke 2015-16. There's one other recruit, so to speak, or new player that we add, Emil Jefferson.
He's back.
Yeah, and frankly, I mean, as good as Harry Giles and some of the other big men are going to be in college basketball, freshmen big men in college basketball this year, Emil Jefferson is going to be an immediate, huge impact on this team. He's going to, from day one, he's going to be probably the best rebounder in the ACC.
Mm-hmm. And he was averaging a double-double when he got hurt last year, right?
Right.
So,
yeah.
That you're right, and people are going to underrate that. I think not just we talked. I think some time ago, especially I think this was in regards to the Jefferson situation, that if Jefferson were to have graduated and if Grayson Allen had left for the NBA, Duke was going to be left with just Matt Jones as an upperclassman in this class. If you're just talking about juniors and seniors, guys who could be captains next year. Jefferson and Jones get to return as captains, and if Kay wants to make Grayson Allen a captain, he certainly can, and I don't think anyone would argue with it. But Grayson Allen doesn't have to be a captain on this team because Duke has two, reliable, steady guys. I think there's been a lot of shade thrown at Matt Jones and how much he contributed at the end of the season, which may or may not have been due to injuries, et cetera, et cetera. But two really steady senior leaders who have been through a lot in the ACC and in the NCAA tournament to be the vocal leaders for this team. That Grayson Allen doesn't need to shoulder any of that load is just another luxury for this Duke team next year.
Yeah, and that was going to lead to my point that, next year, we talk about the talent level that we're going to have in this team, but we're going to be very balanced. This year, the depth that we didn't have when Jefferson went down really hurt us, especially during the season when our, main guys got really tired. Next year, we won't have that issue. There's going to be there's going to be competition at every single position, not just for starting time, but for also just for minutes. I mean, everybody is going to get better because there's somebody that can challenge them for playing time in the basketball court. And I think that is what you want from a team, especially a team as balanced as we will be next year, with the leadership aspect, with the defensive aspect, and just with the, scoring talent that we're going to have. I think that is going to be very, very key for us to do well next year and meet the high expectations that are being placed on next year's team. One thing I will note about Marcus Bolden, we talk about his recruiting a little bit. He went to the same high school as Matt Jones. He's from the same town. So maybe that is going to be something that helps us solidify that commitment over the next couple of weeks. Only time will tell, but I think it's good that, Matt Jones is going to, for all his flaws that he had late in the season, possibly due to injuries, I think that his leadership is going to be, very, very welcome on this team. Emil Jefferson being back, it wasn't that he had a double-double every game. It was the fact that he had a dominating double-double in the games that he played early in the season. Even against
the defense.
Defense, he's the quarterback of this team. He's the guy that's calling out there was times during the Indiana game that he was calling out the offensive sets before Indiana could even run them. So that is smart quarterbacking. It's not just where he's, not just directing where the defense should go and how it should be set up. But when you know what they're going to run and are able to counteract that with a defense, that is incredible. That's some, if you're talking about football, that's some Peyton Manning type, quarterbacking. So that is going to be.
Do you mean the kind of stuff that UNC should have been doing on the last play against Villanova?
Exactly. So
wait. We're going to talk about ourselves. We're not going to ourselves.
I just wanted to throw that in there. You really set me up for it.
Yeah, but that is going to be there's a lot of things that are going to be talked about next year, but these little things are going to be what's going to help us meet these expectations that are so widely placed. And we'll see if they're going to be warranted. Now it looks like on paper it is, but we actually got to play the games next year, and we're going to have looking at some of the schedule nuggets that have come out, we're going to have some pretty tough games next year. So this balance is going to be probably the most important thing that this 2016-17 team has, and that is what
Donald, I'm so glad you brought it up, and I think you are 100% correct. I think one thing, Duke hasn't had a lot of depth for the past several years. I think, a lot of it was a function of the one and done and guys leaving very, very quickly and early and a lot of different things. But the practices, Duke practices next year are going to be unbelievably intense. And Hey, I'm the king of hyperbole. I love to make bold statements that sound absurd. Ready for my absurd statement?
Uh-oh.
So if you assume that the starters for Duke next year, and I'm pretty sure these are going to be the starters, at least at the beginning of the season, will be Grayson Allen, Emil Jefferson, Matt Jones, Harry Giles, and Jason Tatum. So those are the starters. If those are the starters, I will put out there that I think Frank Jackson, Luke Kennard, Chase Jeter, Marcus Bolden, who I think we're going to get, and Javon DeLaurier or Jack White or one of those other guys, that's a top 25 team, that our bench is a top 25 team. That's how good.
I read somewhere on Twitter the other day that they threw out that lineup that you just mentioned. They said the bench would probably be third or fourth in the ACC this year or next year.
Yeah, exactly. So, and yes, it's fun to laugh about that and think about how great that is and such. But the real point of that is, oh my God, the practices. The practices are going to be unbelievably intense. It's going to be incredibly competitive. No one is going to be able to get away with coasting for even 1 second. And as a result, this team is going to get better and better and better as the season moves on, as they work against each other more and more. I truly think that there will be more competition in practices than Duke will face in third half of their games at a minimum, and maybe more like 2/3 or 3/4 of their games. That's how good I think our bench will be next year. That's how good Duke will be next year.
Also, can I just make a quick note? I just want to send a request out to anyone who listens that's in the Iron Duke's office or works directly with the basketball team. A lot of people ask you guys for tickets to basketball games, and next year will be no exception. I would like to ask that you invite the three of us down for practice. That's it. Just one practice. I think that's going to be all we need to see, and it's probably going to be the best basketball that you may see outside of actual games. So I'll just put that out there. If you see fit to invite us down for a practice, we would happily take you up on that. Go ahead, Sam.
I don't know if my optimism is as unbridled as the two of you's is, but obviously I'm still looking forward to it and think that this team could be very good. I remember what Carolina.
Dude, very good.
Listen, I remember how Carolina fans were last summer, and of course they made it very, very close to winning the national championship, but they didn't. And I will also caveat that with, I think that this Duke team has more talent than that UNC team did this.
It ain't even close. Season. It ain't even close.
But I just, oh man, it feels so weird to be to be like so out there like that. So I will be optimistic, but I will also still predict, as I usually do, that Duke will like lose a game or two maybe in the non-conference, and they'll struggle a little bit in the ACC, and they'll lose a stupid game to like Clemson or Wake Forest or something like that in January, and everyone's going to freak out. So I'm just telling you, those things are going to happen because they happen every year, unless it's like 1999. So just everybody.
And I've been on the record. I've said to a couple people that I think next year's team will remind us a lot of 1999. There are going to be games that will be over by halftime.
Hey,
Duke will have 25, 30 points. I'm getting a 40-0 tattoo. I'm getting
right. now. Well, don't do that yet. But
I wanted to address something before we moved on. Just because you brought up Derek Thornton. I don't know if we were gonna talk about him separately.
No, but go ahead, please.
There was a lot of back and forth on Twitter and across the depths of college basketball internet about why Derek Thornton was transferring and sort of what the situation was. And obviously there was the standard, like those who hate Duke will say one thing about how Derek Thornton wasn't treated well and was kicked out to make room for Marcus Bolden. And there's the Duke side that's like, oh, well, Derek Thornton didn't want to live up to the standards of the program and didn't mesh with yada, yada, yada. The one thing, and I'll bring it back because I was just mentioning it, from the haters side, there was a point that, like I just said, that Thornton was like getting pushed out, so that he was brought to Duke early, and they said you're going to have the ball from day one, and now they're kicking him out so they can make room for a center, like hopefully a center, because there's not even a guarantee that Bolden is going to commit. That's insane. If Duke was going to, I don't think Duke would do this, and I really don't know. I don't know Coach K personally or anything, but I think that if Duke was going to kick a guy off the team to make room for another center, you figure it wouldn't be Derek Thornton, right? Like, there's other dudes on the bench who are taking scholarships who didn't play like 25 minutes a game last year. So I think that line of reasoning is silly. The rest of it is all speculation, but please, not that any like Kentucky fans or UNC fans or anybody listens to us, but please don't tell me that Duke kicked Derek Thornton out or that Coach K like forced him out so that he could recruit Marcus Bolton. That's insane. And just like with every story, be it Rashid Suleiman last year or like guys in the past, like Elliot Williams, I know that when he left, there was like, well, here's the official story, but here's kind of the real story. The stuff with Taylor King, like all these guys who transfer away. We're never going to hear the real story from the player, and we're never going to hear the real story from Duke. We're going to, it'll like slowly come out over time about what the real truth was. But it's silly to speculate on it now. And it's also silly to make up stuff that doesn't make any sense. So I guess just, not that this call will resonate with crazy college basketball people of the ilk that I think would listen here, but just relax, get over it. These things happen, and it happens to every program. Guys leave for one reason or another. And especially in this current era of college basketball, I think like there are more transfers annually than there are teams. So everybody deals with transfers. Everybody deals with them for their own reasons. And it happens to good teams as much as it does to, like middling and bad teams. So just relax. It's fine. Derek Thornton, I think, will end up being happy wherever he ends up going because let's be real, he had lapses this year, but he's a very talented player. There may still be a very bright NBA future ahead for him. We don't really know, and we'll see how he reacts to whatever school he's going to next season. So everybody chill on the Derek Thornton thing.
I'm glad you brought it up, and I agree. I think we want to move on to Carolina and the national championship game in just a moment. But I'm glad you said that because I want to add about Derek Thornton that this is a kid that Duke fans should support, and we do. I haven't seen Duke fans ripping him. Maybe I'm missing it, but I haven't seen it anyplace. He made great sacrifices, worked extra hard to ensure that he could come to Duke early because we desperately needed him. And even if he didn't live up to some fans' expectations, even if he didn't live up to his own expectations this season in terms of his scoring production and minutes played, he was an incredibly important player for Duke. There were look, we had as thin a bench as possible this year. For most games, he was it. And there's certainly plenty of games that he started, but he made sacrifices both in high school to get to Duke, and then once he made it to Duke, he was, as far as I could see, was a good teammate. I did not see the kid sulking or being difficult. We didn't hear anything negative about him coming out of the program. I wish him all the luck and really hope he's very, very successful wherever he ends up going. Duke has released him and has said, we're not going to block you from going. I think he can't go to another ACC school. That's sort of a standard thing, but I'm sure Duke is wishing him well wherever he goes. It's a pity because I would have loved to have seen.
I was going to say,
go ahead.
It sounded like he wanted to transfer back to the West Coast, but nothing had been official yet.
Right. That's what it sounds like is going to happen.
Right. I wasn't going to go there because we just don't know. But a good kid, and I agree with you, Sam. The notion that Duke pushed him out, is silly. It's crazy. It's stupid. Because I look at our roster in years to come. Yes, next year we're stacked, we're loaded. It looks like it's going to be an amazing season, but Duke's going to lose a tremendous amount of talent off of that team. And if you're telling me that Derek Thornton could have been there in 2 years as the starting point guard for the 2017-2018 Duke Blue Devils, I would be thrilled right now. I'm sure Coach K would be thrilled right now. The idea that we pushed him out is crazy. It's ludicrous. I think he would have been an important featured player for Duke. If not as much in his sophomore years, he would like in his junior and senior years, he would have been very, very important for us. But he's gone now. So, hey, so guys, we're going to move on now. I asked you all before we got on, how do you say that word? Is it Schadenfreude?
The Google pronunciation is Schadenfreude.
Schadenfreude. So we are still enjoying the Schadenfreude from Carolina's gut punch of a loss. I mean, I'm not sure. Sure, they could have been the first number one seed to lose to a 16. That would have hurt. That would have stung. But I think aside from that, losing in the national title on a last-second buzzer beater was about as bad as it gets. Yes, they got to enjoy the maximum number of games in the season, but what Chris Jenkins did to them was just epic. And you pointed it out earlier, Sam. I think it was you who pointed it out earlier. He did it because Carolina didn't bother to guard him. It's like insane that they didn't guard the best shooter on the floor.
It was kind of like the end of the Duke game, the first Duke game, where they like didn't have a plan on offense, and the Duke guys were all set, and the Carolina guys were like, "Well, what the hell?"
Yeah, exactly. It was a great game. One of the really great national title games of all time. I've seen people sort of compare it to the Duke Butler game. There was a Kansas Memphis game that was great. I still think one of the greatest games, Duke Louisville in 1986, my freshman year, was an amazing, fabulous game. I still sort of think the greatest buzzer beater to me in NCAA championship game history was. Do you guys remember Keith Smart buried a baseline jumper against Syracuse to give Indiana the national title in, I think it was 87.
It was 87, and yeah. I wasn't born yet.
I was going to say, you talk about, was it Lorenzo Charles for NC State? I think that's probably another one that was being immediately compared to this one.
Yeah. So, and all the congratulations to Villanova. And by the way, you know, we've been talking about how great Duke's going to be next year. There are going to be some teams to challenge them, and Villanova will be one of them. They lose Archie Diacono, who's their point guard, who, you know, was the head of the beast, so to speak, and they lose Daniel Ochefu, who was their big man. So they lose their best little guy and their best big guy. But in between, they got a lot of stuff coming back. Villanova is going to be very, very good next year. But I want to talk about poor North Carolina, who, oh gosh, such a pity. You delayed NCAA sanctions as long as you possibly could. You held out hoping that this was going to be the year you'd win that national title, and just didn't happen for you. Guys, what you got on that?
I started off the game. I didn't watch the first half. I was out with some friends. We were kind of celebrating. There's a place that we used to go to here in DC that was closing last week, and so we tried to get drinks and kind of mill around one last time as a group. But I went home and saw the second half, and I'm watching the game, and it seems like I was like, all right, Villanova's pulling away, and then UNC starts coming back. So when Marcus Page hits that ridiculous double clutch 3-point shot with 5 seconds left,
which by the way was a terrible shot. I mean, he made it. It's just a horrible shot.
It was a terrible shot, but it was that if that was the game. If that was for the game, or if that's the thing that makes a champion. Like, that's an iconic one shining moment that, like, if you think about Mario Chalmers in 2008 hitting a ridiculous 3-pointer that sent that game to overtime and Kansas ended up winning it all. That was going to happen. Like, in my mind, I was like, all right, if this is going to overtime, then UNC's winning this game. And that is the one shining moment. That ridiculous double clutch, terrible 3-pointer that somehow went in. The literal prayer that was answered. And then Chris Jenkins. Look, my man Chris Jenkins, if you ever come to Durham, North Carolina, that city has your drinks for life. You are a hero for making that shot and basically making what was going to be the one shining moment of the tournament, of probably the best tournament in recent memory, if not ever. He made that non-sequential, and he made that obsolete. People aren't even talking about how ridiculous a shot Marcus Page's 3-pointer was, because he hit the 3-pointer to win the national championship for Villanova. And I don't think I've ever been happier for a team to win a national title that was not named Duke. So, since I started school. So it was incredible. It was literally the coup de grace on what a wild tournament that was. Everything in those 5 seconds was everything that this tournament was and more, and it was great.
Donald, you're free to get a Chris Jenkins Villanova jersey.
I might. I'll start with, if Chris Jenkins, meet me at Tobacco Road in Durham one weekend. I'll make sure the whole town knows you. But otherwise, that was just one of the greatest things I have seen in a long time, and it just caps off what a ridiculous tournament that this was.
Yeah, I was watching the game. I also only got to really watch the end. It was like the last 6 or 7 minutes. I was on work travel this week and didn't get back to my hotel until kind of late. But I watched it's like the last 6 or 7 minutes. So I was watching the Carolina comeback and the back and forth at the end. So I saw Marcus Page's shot. I was like, oh my God. I think there were a few expletives, but mostly just shock and amazement. Not really so much upset, because
I think my quote was, "Are you bleeping kidding me?"
Yeah, there were a few of those. But then But I was like, you know what? Villanova's got like 4.5 seconds left. They got plenty of time. And if there's any coach I don't trust to like make sure the defense is set against a really good offensive team, it's Roy Williams in North Carolina. And sure enough, Villanova just walked the ball up and hit a three. Like as if it was no big deal. And then I think I just laughed for like 2 minutes, like lying in bed. It was so great. I loved it. I watched the whole celebration and the one shining moment. As a Duke fan, I didn't think they had enough Duke highlights in the one shining moment video, but it's fine. Because it did get to finish with that awesome 3-pointer by Jenkins, and so cool for Villanova. I know that a lot of folks, and probably us, I'm sure, I have dumped on Villanova and the Big East in general for their general lack of tournament prowess the last few years, especially since a few of the Big East teams had left for the ACC, and Villanova just silenced that. Man, they ran the gauntlet in this tournament. They had to beat Kansas, they had to beat Oklahoma, and then they had to beat North Carolina, arguably three of the very best, if not the three best teams in the tournament, maybe other than Michigan State. I think that if people were picking, I think the most popular picks for the Final Four was like Michigan State, North Carolina, Kansas, and Oklahoma. And Villanova beat three of those teams to win the national championship. So you really can't take anything away from that team. They performed as well as anybody could in this tournament, and they did it on a hard road. So all the props to them and congratulations. It's been a very long time since Villanova won a championship, and I know that they take their basketball seriously. So that was cool for them.
And by the way, two things. First of all, it wasn't just that they beat those teams, and you're right. It was an unbelievably difficult road for Villanova. They had to go through a number of tough teams. All three of those teams you mentioned were number one at some point during the season. And in fact, between Oklahoma, Kansas, and UNC, they were number one more than any other teams in the country. In terms of the rankings. Not only did Villanova beat those teams, but my God, the beat down they laid on Oklahoma was epic. Worst beatdown in the history of the Final Four. And that was a senior-laden, really good Oklahoma team, an Oklahoma team that had dismantled Oregon, who beat us fairly easily. I mean, when you look at like the transitive property, I think Villanova was like 130 points better than Duke. Not that ever would have happened that way, but yeah, huge props to Villanova. Just a great run for them. Very, very, very impressive. You guys got anything else on the championship game? Or I want to get to one other thing about Carolina, unless you guys got something else on it.
No, go for it.
Okay. So in the wake of Carolina's loss, there have been a number of people who say, okay, well, now the NCAA is going to finally hit Carolina with the punishment over the cheating scandal. It's not really cheating, I guess, fraudulent classes, whatever, the lack of education scandal. And I just want to say something. Like there's a post on the board that said, hey, next month, the NCAA hammer is going to hit UNC. And I'm like, where is this coming from? I don't think Carolina's going to – I want folks to know, I really don't think Carolina's going to get hit with their punishment anytime soon. I think the NCAA – actually owes UNC a revised notice of infractions, notice of allegations, I should say, or infractions, whatever they call it, NOA, notice of allegations, or whatever, NOI, I don't know. The NCAA owes Carolina another notice of infractions before they can hit Carolina with the actual sanctions. I really think that's the case because over the past week, actually it was 10 days ago, we got a story from Dan Kane, the fabulous Dan Kane, friend of the podcast, who's been on the show before. I have ranted about the fact that I think Carolina has lied and intentionally deceived things. Dan Kane came up with another story regarding independent study classes at UNC that to me shows that UNC continues to lie, to not tell the truth, to try to cloud things over. Carolina has said to both the NCAA and to the accreditation agency, SACS, that there was no limit on independent study classes prior to 2006, 2007. That has been Carolina's stance. The NCAA asked about it. The Southern Association of Accreditation, whatever the thing, asked about it. And Carolina said, no. We started having a limit on independent studies in 2006, 2007. And Dan Kane has uncovered a number of records, a number of papers, a number of documents that show that Carolina actually started limiting the number of independent study classes you could take at least in 2003 and probably even before then. And that this was readily apparent and that people at UNC, everyone knew this, that you were only allowed to take no more than 2 independent study classes. And the reality is that the academic advising department for athletics was putting athletes in 2, 3, sometimes even 4 independent study classes at the same time, because independent studies was an easy way for them to fake the classes. And it was also an easy way to not have other students enrolled in the same class with these basketball and football players and the such who were not really getting any kind of an education. And I think the NCAA has been made aware of this stuff, and I think that UNC is going to get another notice to explain, to asking them to explain how the heck this happened, and perhaps alleging that the Carolina scandal is if it's even possible to be worse. I think it has now been shown to be even worse than it was. And Carolina continues to lie about this. It's disgusting. It's horrible. And they show no repentance. They show no signs of wanting to take responsibility for their actions, of wanting to change what they've done in the past. It's despicable. It's disgusting. Horrible, horrible, horrible. And I don't think anything's going to change anytime soon. And I'm so looking forward to the NCAA destroying the program. That's what they should do. They should wreck Carolina athletics. But I think that we are still 3 to 6 months from that happening.
And it's going to be. I think you're right in that it's going to be a slow period. But the NCAA is really weird with these sort of things, right? Like just last week, or earlier, actually late, a few days ago, they issued a quick ruling about whether coaches in football can have quote unquote training camps or spring practices outside of their natural habitat, so to speak. And
right, this is good. They should call
this was
Jim
in
Harbaugh
response
rule.
of Jim Harbaugh basically taking his guys on spring break to Florida and having spring practice in Florida instead of having it in Michigan, which makes total sense because in Michigan it just snowed last week, and in Florida it was not snowing. So if you want to get
the other thing Harbaugh was doing was Harbaugh was trying to sort of showcase his program in an area of the country where he thinks there's a lot of fertile athletes that he can. He wanted to sort of say, "Hey, SEC, I'm coming to get your best players."
And the SEC complained about it.
Jason, did you just describe a bunch of 16 and 17-year-old boys as fertile?
Oh boy.
I know where you were going. I know exactly what you were trying to say. It was just the way that you put all those words together.
There is a lot of talent in these areas.
A lot of fertility in Florida.
But anyway, like they moved quickly on that. This was something that happened over the course of 2 weeks, but they still have to deal with UNC. They're going to have to deal with Louisville, and I feel like there's always something that comes along where the NCAA is like, "Ooh, shiny piece of candy," and they go and deal with that really quickly and leave this on the back burner. So while I was joking with people saying that UNC could become the first school ever to lose 3 national championships in 1 month in one sport, I don't think that's really going to happen. And I agree with you, and I think it's going to take quite a while for them to really get this thing down and hammer them. But if it takes all this time and in the end they do what's just and hammer them hard, then I would be okay with it. But if in the end they're just going to kind of sweep everything under the rug to the point where people forget about it, then that's terrible for the NCAA. And I hope that they're in this dead period now where there's there's obviously sports going on, but their main bread and butter sports, football and basketball, aren't doing anything until football starts back up in late July, early August. So these guys need to really spend this, spring and summer and get everything that they need to get so that they can make these decisions, and it affects, so that, and I'm sure for UNC's perspective, if there's any effects, they'll want those sooner rather than later so that they can get through them and continue on with their program. But I agree with you. I think it's going to be a long time before we hear from them because the NCAA is notoriously slow at these things.
Well, and by the way, I don't mind if it continues to drag out. There are people who are like, "Oh my God, it's taking forever." I don't mind it one bit. Now that UNC has lost their shot at their national title, and by the way, next year's Carolina team could be good. Depends on who goes pro. They could still be fairly good. They're not going to be national title contenders, I don't believe. But the longer this goes on, the more it impacts Carolina recruiting. Carolina has struggled to get the top tier of players. They're still getting guys, like top 30, top 50, top 70 kind of players, but they're not getting kids. They're not getting one and dones. They're not getting kids who are top, really, solid top 20 players. And I think they will continue to struggle at that as long as the shadow, the specter of these sanctions are still hanging over their head. And I think that's a good thing for Duke. I don't know that Harry Giles would have definitely picked Duke if Carolina had really been an option. I don't know if Brandon Ingram would have definitely picked Duke if Carolina had really been an option. And there are more and more guys each year who removing UNC from the mix, making Carolina a school that really isn't attractive as an option because there's the specter of sanctions hanging over their head. I think benefits Duke, benefits Kentucky and Kansas and Arizona and a few other schools also. But one of the schools that get benefited is Duke. And Donald, I'm glad you brought up Louisville. One of the things we haven't talked about yet, Louisville has self-imposed even more penalties over the sort of the hooker scandal, the prostitute scandal. They've reduced their scholarships in 2017-18 and 2018-19, and they're reducing the number of days their coaches can go on the road, the number of official visits they're going to take from recruits. These aren't like horrible, terrible, really, really difficult kind of things that they've put themselves through, but I like that Louisville is owning up to we did something wrong. We have banned ourselves from the tournament, and now we are taking some additional recruiting-related and scholarship-related penalties. I think the NCAA may have even more to hit Louisville with, but I like that Louisville is acting the exact opposite of Carolina, who continues to duck, dodge, deny, and dodge, or whatever the hell, to steal a line from what's that movie? Duck, dodge, and what movie am I talking about?
It's called
Dodgeball. Dodgeball. I'm old and I'm forgetting my movies. But anyway, Carolina is the opposite of Louisville. I kind of respect that Louisville is stepping up and trying to take some of their medicine. I think the NCAA will have more medicine to give them, but at least they've done a little bit extra. And are we done with that? We're done with that, huh?
I think we are.
Yeah, I think so.
Okay, so we've been talking a lot about reflecting on last season and looking ahead to this season, but let's reflect all the way back to the beginning of the season.
Oh boy,
Sam.
here he goes.
Yes, Sam. I'm smiling. You can't see me. Sam, will you recap for us? At the start of the season, in the preseason, we all had predictions of how we thought Duke would do.
So this was a game I came up with on the fly, and you guys I think accused me of cheating because I claimed to have come up with it on the fly. There was some impression that maybe I had come up with it ahead of time and put a little more thought into it than I let you guys have, but that wasn't the case. I don't like to cheat like that or anything, but so I'll recap very quickly. We did a season predictions thing, and it was just based on stats. So I asked everybody who the leading scorer was and rebounder and assists and blocks and steals in minutes. And then we had a tiebreaker scenario involving the number of total wins. There was also a guessing game for which category did nobody get right. So I will just quickly recap what happened. I won't give everybody's predictions for everything, but so the leading scorer for this year was Grayson Allen. Both Jason and I picked that one right. The leading rebounder this year, it kind of depends on how you define it. So Marshall Plumlee didn't really. So Marshall Plumlee was the leading rebounder for those who played almost all the games this season. So I choose to discount Emil Jefferson, which means that none of us got that one right because
no, I had Jefferson.
No, I know. I'm saying I know. Both you and I had Jefferson. I'm not going to count it because Jefferson only played 9 games. So,
I want to lodge a formal protest.
All right. Well, you're being shot down by the commissioner of this makeup league. So I just Roger Goodell'd you. Go to your corner. So Donald picked Chase Jeter. So shame on you. Assists, I tried. Jason got Grayson Allen for assists. Jason and Donald both picked Marshall Plumlee in the blocks category. I was the only one that got steals right, which was Grayson Allen. I know that at one point we were going over these like mid-season. Jason had all of them right, so I guess Allen pulled ahead. And then in the minutes category, Jason also won with Grayson Allen. So Jason ran away with this competition. So congratulations to him. He gets the inaugural prize, which I haven't decided what it is yet. So if anybody out there has a suggestion for the prize, Jason won. Although I did get the tiebreaker right, sadly, because I picked the lowest number of wins. So I know what a bummer.
You should be ashamed of yourself for winning that one.
Yeah, no, I'm sorry. You know what's incredible is that Duke went to the Sweet 16 this year, and had like 2 All-American level players, and everyone was like, all right, they made the Sweet 16, fine. it was a very strange year for Duke fans. But anyway, thank you guys for playing, and don't worry, Jason. Even though you brought it up to us ahead of when we were planning this episode, I was already prepared to review the season predictions, knowing at least in the back of my mind that you had probably won. So congratulations to that, Donald. You really need to try harder next year, man.
Well, you know what? Next year's roster, this actually will be a very interesting thing to watch.
It's going to be
this game's going to be a lot more difficult. I don't think Jason's getting 4 next year. I think he might win with 1 or 2. So
yeah. Well,
yeah, it will not be easy next year. And by the way, I want to point out, I think there should be a prize. Maybe it's a booby prize for the worst prediction. And I think you sort of mentioned it. Donald picked Chase Jeter to lead the team in rebounds. That goes down because a lot of the other predictions where we got them wrong, like Donald picked Ingram to lead the team in points, and yes, Grayson Allen did, but I mean that's
totally reasonable.
It was close, yes.
It was not a bad choice.
And with Steele's only a difference of 7, so between Allen and Ingram, so it was close.
We all knew that both Brandon Ingram and Grayson Allen would get steals.
Yes. But Donald special props. Chase Jeter to lead the team in rebounds. In retrospect, boy, that's a good man.
I had faith in my man, so.
So listen, everybody out there, this will be the forum participation this week. I know we haven't kept up with doing forum participation, but you have to come up with a prize for Jason for winning the challenge, and we have to come up with a punishment for Donald for making the worst prediction. And I get nothing. I'm just going to continue being the commissioner of this.
The commissioner, ducks and dodges again.
Maybe I'll change my like forum header name on that.
To predictions commissioner
of the stats game.
Yeah, I like that. Better than Dev 11.
Stats commish.
Yeah. There you go. Okay. So if you read no, my like header underneath, like it says Dev 11, but then underneath it has like we can edit our titles because we're moderators.
Right. You can be stats commissioner, yes.
Yeah, exactly. I'll be stats commissioner. Okay. And the only people who will get it will be the people who listen to the podcast. So listen to the podcast, and you will get all the inside jokes.
Yeah, all 12 of them. I think there are 12 people who each download it like 30 times.
And then the other great thing is titles don't show up on the mobile version of the forum. And I don't know about you guys. I'd say that like 98% of my forum reading is on the mobile version, so I don't even ever see those titles.
Yep.
So anyway, let's move on to more important things. Jason, what's next?
So what is next is Player of the Year. Usually at this time we do Player of the Week. The season is over. So we will reflect on the entire year. And folks, I'm going to let you in on a little hint. We planned this out in advance. We sort of talked about it, and we decided that we were each going to take a different guy because we think there are 3 guys who really, really, really deserve to be in the running for Player of the Year. Sam, I will let you start. Give us your Player of the Year pick.
So, like you said, there were 3 guys you could pick from, and luckily,
you could have taken someone else, but there are really only 3 contenders.
Yeah, sure. I picked the underrated version, so I went with the like most improved. Well, it's debatable who's most improved, but I guess we'll get to that. But I went with kind of the underrated guy, the one who, of the 3, the one who didn't make any All-American teams, will get an NBA look, but is certainly not projected in any mock drafts to make a huge impact, at least right away. And that's Marshall Plumlee, the 5th-year senior. I know that we talk. I think there's a lot of talk on our forum, and maybe there is in other places, about the usefulness of having basketball players redshirt because by the time, they don't have to be especially wide once they get to college. So in football, the guys have to get bigger and stronger, especially like linemen, linebackers, guys like that, tight ends. They need that time to like bulk up. Basketball players don't really need that, right? They grow to however tall they're going to be by the time they're like 17 or 18, and then they go out and play. So how useful is it often for a basketball player to take a red shirt and take all 5 years, especially if he's like a 4 or 5 star recruit? In the case of Marshall Plumlee, that I feel like that is like all you need to see about the usefulness of having a 5th year. So I'll start with his season before. Marshall averaged, he averaged 9.6 minutes a game. This is the previous year. This is not this year. 9.6 minutes a game, 2.3 points, 2.3 rebounds, about half of a block, and 1.5 fouls per game. So he's averaging 1.5 fouls in like 10 minutes a game. It's not very good. This year, 30 minutes a game. It went up to 33 minutes a game in ACC and postseason play. So kind of leaving out the Jefferson and games against bad opponents, more or less. He went from 9.6 minutes a game up to 30 minutes a game. He went from 2.3 minutes a game up to 8.2. He went from 2.3 rebounds up to 8.6. He went from 0.6 blocks up to a block and a half. And his foul rate only raised from 1.6 fouls a game to 2.7 fouls a game. So the increase there was pretty minimal, given how he was playing 3 times as many minutes a game and was tasked with a much harder defensive assignment, especially once Emil Jefferson was out. No one predicted this. No one knew that Marshall Plumlee was going to be playing 30 plus minutes a game and was going to be giving it to us. And we were just giving Donald, some grief about the fact that he picked Chase Jeter to lead the team in rebounds. It's not like any of us picked Marshall Plumlee. That's the only category where we didn't pick the right answer. And granted, maybe Emil Jefferson would have taken it if he played the whole season, but it remains the fact that Marshall Plumlee led the team in rebounds for guys who played the whole season. He was the most effective rebounder on the team, and in many ways was the force that kept Duke spaced appropriately on both ends of the court. He doesn't make a lot of fantastic offensive moves, but he was able to clean up the boards pretty effectively, given that oftentimes he was the only guy down there getting rebounds, especially late in the season. He only fouled out 3 times. Once conference play started. So, there were a lot of concerns of what are we going to do if, Marshall Plumlee is probably going to foul out a lot. He doesn't contain the fouls very well. He did such a good job of that in the games that really mattered. So for me, my player of the year is Marshall Plumlee. The effect that he had on this team, I think, is something no one could have predicted. And he deserves a ton of credit for this. And I'm sure that he will be rewarded in kind at the basketball team dinner, which I would imagine is coming up very soon. I don't know. But so shout out to Marshall Plumlee. He is my player of the year. And if you had asked me at the beginning of the season to if we had played the predictions game and said rank your most likely players of the year for Duke, I would have probably had Marshall Plumlee 6th. But I'm taking him. I think that he deserves it. And man, that guy gave everything to the program this year. And he was such a great leader and such a great teammate and such a great player that no one really expected. So there you go.
I love it. A fine choice. And like you said, sort of the underdog, the least obvious of the choices for player of the year. Donald, your turn. And I think you took the most obvious. Nothing wrong with that, man, because I would have taken him if you hadn't. But give us your player of the year.
Yeah. So I went with Grayson Allen. Of course, I echo everything that Sam said about Marshall Plumlee. I think he was fantastic and really was, even if he wasn't my MVP, he was definitely the unsung hero of the year to me, because without him, we would have been way down the gutter in a lot of these games because of his Plumlee runs that he basically did during the season. So props to him for that. I'm going with Grayson Allen. And again, last year he was, a freshman that, had flashes of brilliance. Of course, we know about what he did in the Final Four in the national championship game, but he averaged over the course of the season, he only averaged 4.4 points a game. This year, he averaged 21.6 points a game, and that was the biggest increase from one year to the next in points per game in ACC history. So he clearly was. I don't care what the ACC sports writers were saying. He was definitely the most improved player of the year. But he increased at his output on all ends of the floor. Especially offensive, and he just was the man all year. He took everyone's best shot on a nightly basis, and he still came out and played like a superstar, which is what we needed this year. And he became one of the best players in college basketball. I mean, we thought when he came in, he was, I don't want to say the least heralded of the 4 that came in last year, but he was the man. Even last year in the national championship game, we don't win that game without him. And this year, there was plenty of games where if Grayson Allen doesn't score 20, 30 points, we were not in that ball game. So, and I think that is why I selected him to be my MVP or the player of the year. But now he's ready to be the seasoned veteran, which is a great thing. There was talk about him leaving, whether he would go to the NBA drafts. I'm glad he's staying because we get 21.6 points per game back. And just with how hard he works on the court, off the court to get better. I mean, you can expect that maybe to go up next year, even with the talent. It's always possible with this guy. Everything is possible with Grayson Allen on the floor. So he's ready to be the seasoned veteran star, and I'm ready to see him help lead this team, 2016-17 team, to some great things. So props to you, Grayson Allen, on a great year. I'm glad you're sticking around. I'm glad a number 3 jersey will be running on the court again next year, and he's my player of the year.
And I just wanted to add it before Jason gets to his, and I think we all know who he's going to take. But just to add on to Grayson Allen, I mentioned when talking about Marshall Plumlee that you could say that he's the most improved player this year. But dude, you could say the same thing about Grayson Allen. He increased his minutes and his points and his rebounds and his assists at like greater rates than Plumlee did from the previous season. It's astounding how much more of a load he took on this year and just shouldered it like he'd been doing it his whole life. It was amazing. And you mentioned, Donald, that recruiting class. Grayson Allen going into next year, I think is going to be, if not the front runner, one of the front runners for All-American status, for National Player of the Year awards. Jalil Okafor, if you guys remember a little bit last year, kind of faded down the stretch at one when Frank Kaminsky sort of took over the National Player of the Year race, and Kaminsky basically ran away with all those awards. And I don't think that Okafor won any of them. Grayson Allen might end up being the only guy out of that recruiting class to win a National Player of the Year award, and he very well could next year. I mean, you never know what's going to happen.
He will be the preseason player. He'll be the preseason player of the year.
I agree.
I mean,
for
the highest
what that year worth next to nothing, but
right.
Yeah, no, you're right. He improved his scoring by 17 points a game. That's crazy. That's just absurd.
Yeah.
It's absurd.
Like Nolan Smith did that from his sophomore year to junior year. Like nobody does that.
But the only stat that he did not improve on from last year to this year was free throw percentage. He went down 0.8%. And that is, I will give him the benefit of the doubt there because I believe he took maybe 10 more free throws a game than he did last year. So that 0.8% still translates to 9 more points that he was getting on a regular basis than he was last year from the charity stripe. So I am mad at him on that.
Oh, that was some fancy math you just did.
What's that?
That was fancy math, I think, that you just did.
That
was
math.
Really good. Yeah.
It was completely made up math, and it probably statistically does not mean anything, but math all the same.
All right, cool. Jason, player of the year?
So my player of the year is a guy who had all the accolades coming into college, and really, when folks reflect on Brandon Ingram, I don't think people will remember what the first month of the season was like for him. Guys, Brandon Ingram was not all that good when he first suited up for Duke. He had a stretch in mid-November, Kentucky, Virginia Commonwealth, and Georgetown. Remember those games? Duke wasn't looking all that great at that point, and a lot of it was because Brandon Ingram really, really was struggling. Again, in those 3 games, which were the 3 sort of first even moderately difficult games on Duke's schedule, Brandon Ingram shot 5 of 20 from the field, 25%. He didn't hit a single 3-pointer in those 3 games. And he really looked like a guy who was going to struggle with the physicality of the college game, that maybe the talk that he was going to be this really good outside shooter with, a strong ball handling going to play out. He had turnovers in those games. He only scored, single digits. He did not get to double digits in any of those games. And as of November, it looked like Brandon Ingram was not going to live up to the hype that he was one of the top players in the class. The moment we hit December 2nd against Indiana, Brandon Ingram scores 24 points on 10 of 15 shooting, and he never looked back from that moment forward. From that moment to the rest of the season, he scored in double digits in every game except one, the game against Louisville that we lost in late February. He only scored 8 points in that game. You could book him for somewhere between 16 and 25 points and somewhere between like 8 and 12 rebounds. Brandon Ingram was an absolute force of nature. I think he had more plays where you sort of just dropped your jaw on the floor and went, how did he do that than anyone else on the Duke team? He was playing, heavy minutes, routinely playing 39 or 40 minutes virtually every single game of the season once we got to January or so, because we needed that much of him once we lost Emil Jefferson. He was forced to play out of position because Emil Jefferson had been, the power forward, the big man for Duke, and suddenly we needed Brandon Ingram to step into that role, and he handled it beautifully, often, playing against guys who were at least 50 pounds heavier than him, if not more than that. I thought he had an amazing freshman season. You can argue, you can go back through Duke history. I mean, Brandon Ingram had probably one of the top 2 or 3 seasons of any freshman in Duke history. I really firmly believe that, and was just great for us in the NCAA tournament. He scored 20 points in all 3 of our games in the NCAA tournament. Really a fabulous player, and played so well, shouldered so much of a burden for Duke, and showed how capable he was as a player that most people think he will be the number 1 pick in the NBA draft. He deserves that. He's going to be the next great Dookie in the NBA. I think, NBA GMs are just salivating, drooling at the prospect of having this guy on their roster, because he seems like he can do so many special, amazing things, and we're going to have some fabulous memories of him at Duke. I thought he had just a wonderful season, and you guys said it as well. The 3 guys, these 3 players to me, Grayson Allen, Brandon Ingram, and Marshall Plumlee, were the heart of what Duke basketball was this year. All 3 of them played great all season long, and I'm glad that we could easily decide that these 3 were our sort of co-players of the year, so to speak.
Yeah,
I agree.
I'm totally on board with that. So congratulations to all 3 of them, and to everybody else, step your game up next year.
Yeah, exactly. It's not going to be. I hope it's not easy to pick only 3 next year. I hope we have 5 guys at least, if not more than 5. That'd be a lot of fun. Hey, gentlemen, it's time for parting shots. We've been going on for a while now. Sam, I'll come to you first. You got a final parting shot as we sort of close the book on and wrap up the 2015-2016 season.
Yes, I do. This weekend, like I said, tonight is the 10th of April. It's a Sunday night. This coming weekend is my 5-year reunion at Duke. So I'm going to be back in Durham, celebrating and enjoying all that. Do you guys have any advice for me, since you guys are old and have probably already been to at least one reunion of your own?
I have plenty of advice for you.
Oh, wow.
I had I guess this would be my 12th year out of college. So I had my 10th year anniversary or 10-year reunion 2 years ago, back in 2014. Our class is a little different because, as a lot of you guys know who have been to Durham in the last couple of years, downtown Durham is fantastic, and there's a lot of great things that were there. Downtown Durham was not a place you went to very often when I was in school, because there wasn't anything there. So it's really cool to see the Renaissance and the kind of the shaping of Durham's kind of skyline and just the nightlife that wasn't there. And a lot of my favorite places in Durham now were not there when I was in school. So I think that's kind of a weird little testament. So I would say, first of all, enjoy yourself. Like, get to reunite with all the classmates that you haven't spoken to in 5 years, or even the people that you haven't spoken to in 5 minutes. You're going to have that kind of mix. You get to do your, I believe this year, you get to do Cameron unless they've started the renovation process, and you're not allowed to. But if you are in Cameron, that is also really cool, because
our class party on Saturday night is in Cameron. Yeah,
the 5 year is always in Cameron. I didn't know if they were going to move it because of the renovations that they're doing on the facade, but I'm glad that it's going to be in Cameron, because it's a really cool experience to be in Cameron and have that kind of reuniting with your party, and just kind of take a look at campus. I know you're one who's been back to campus quite a bit since you've graduated, but kind of just take it in and kind of sit on the quad and do some of the things that you used to do in college, and kind of relive your old experiences, with a little bit more age.
I'll be honest.
Have a lot of fun.
I'll be honest. Most of what I did was eat Chick-fil-A and drink Keystone Light.
And you can do that.
Right.
I used to get Dillo. I can't do that anymore. So
can't do that anymore.
Dillo anymore. So even the stuff that I did when I was in college isn't even there anymore. So now that you can still do Chick-fil-A, you can still get your Keystone Light and sit on a bench in the quad and just kind of listen to life walk by you. and kind of take it all in, do that at least once this weekend because it's really, really fresh.
All right. Jason, did you have anything to add to that?
No. I think that's an excellent list of things to do when you go back for your reunion. I haven't been to a reunion in a while. I apologize. I guess I'm an old guy and I got too many other things going on in my life. But have fun. It's a great time.
All right. I will do my best to have as much fun as I can. So you'll get a report on whatever the next episode is about how that went. And if you are in Durham this weekend and you see me, I don't know how you would recognize me because you don't know what I look like. But if you see me, feel free to say hi.
Donald, your turn. What's your parting shot?
My parting shot is just kind of a reflection over the last month. I've said it a lot over the last few podcast episodes, but I just want, even with the national championship, adding that to the collective that was the NCAA tournament this year, it was nothing short of fantastic. Even though we didn't win it all, it was one of the best that I've seen in my lifetime. I think I can use that pretty easily. And it's been a thrill to kind of watch all these things. One shining moment was one of those that I actually stayed up to watch, even though it didn't involve my team and didn't have many Duke highlights in it. Just the mini highlights, like the editing room floor for One Shining Moment must be full of footage that they could have used, but just couldn't find the time to make it in the 3 minute and 17 seconds that Luther Vandross is singing to us. But I just want to say that it was a great tournament. I hope next year's is just as fantastic. And, of course, I hope at the end the One Shining Moment will end with us, our team, watching One Shining Moment from the floor in Phoenix.
I love it. So my parting shot, I got two things. The first one is a shame on you to both the Pitt Panthers and the Georgia Tech Yellow Jackets, two ACC teams who in just the past week or so have hired new coaches. And in both cases, they hired coaches that A, are not exciting to their fan base, and B, are really exciting to the fan bases that they left because those fan bases are thrilled that those guys aren't coaching there anymore. How can you hire a guy from a school where the school was thrilled to get rid of them? That's not a good sign. Pitt hired Kevin Stallings from Vanderbilt. He had some good years at Vanderbilt, but lately had not been very good. And Georgia Tech hired Josh Pastner from Memphis, who a couple of years ago looked like he was a real rising star in the coaching profession, but has really struggled the past couple of seasons. Memphis did not even make the NIT. This season, playing in the American Athletic Conference or whatever. And Memphis is a school with some major league tradition there. A school that has been a major basketball power. We mentioned it earlier in the broadcast. As recently as 2008, they were playing for the national title. And Josh Pastner has taken that program in a decidedly downward stance over the past few years. Georgia Tech and Pitt, what are you thinking? These are not good hires. And for Tech, especially, as someone who lives in Atlanta, there is a tremendous amount of talent coming through the metro Atlanta area in terms of high school basketball players. Really, it's an unprecedented amount of talent that is here right now in Atlanta, including Wendell Carter, who Duke is working very hard to get, considered by many to be the number one player in the 2017 class. But 2017, 2018, and even 2019 look like there's going to be multiple top 25, top 30 players from Metro Atlanta. And if Georgia Tech brought in the right kind of guy who could really excite the fan base and bring these kids in, Tech could instantly elevate to the top of the ACC, or at least the top half of the ACC. And I don't think Josh Pastner is that guy. He is a very, very good recruiter. So in that regard, I think he may be okay. But there's so much negative recruiting, so much stuff that has gone on regarding how difficult his tenure at Memphis has been the past few years. I think he's going to struggle to recruit, given some of the negative things that have been said about him. And I think it's a really bad hire. And I'm disappointed in Georgia Tech and Pittsburgh for not upping their game, for not trying to keep up with the rest of the ACC. There's some fine coaching that happens in the ACC. And I love it when we get it all the way down to the bottom. And I think these two teams are both going to take steps back. I think that they've both, neither one of them has elevated themselves at all with these coaching hires. I think it's going to be big mistakes for both of them, and they're not going to be pleased with it. So that's part one of my parting shot.
I will say really quickly, I'm very glad that Georgia Tech did not. I know they were showing interest in Jeff Capel. I'm very glad that did not transpire for sure for solely selfish reasons.
Yes, because it keeps him here. And I also think if Jeff Capel, I'm sure he would have spoken to Coach K about it and they would have worked out something. But if Jeff Capel had gone to Georgia Tech, I think he would have worked very, very hard on getting Wendell Carter. Jeff Capel's been Duke's lead recruiter on Wendell Carter. Wendell Carter is a huge, important recruit for Duke. And I'm thrilled that Tech did not get Jeff Capel, although I think it would have been a great hire. They would have been really happy if they'd gotten him. And the other guy that they were talking about getting Quanzo Martin from Cal, who is a fabulous recruiter and really did a very nice job at Cal this year. And I think we're lucky Georgia Tech did not get Quanzo Martin either, and that they got Josh Pastner instead. So part 2 of my parting shot is thank you to both of you. Guys, it is so much fun this year.
This was unexpected.
Yeah.
It has been so much fun this year. We've shared in the responsibility and the joy that is the DBR podcast. And it's not just thank you to the two of you. It's thank you to the dozens and dozens, maybe more than a couple dozen people out there who are listening to us, who've been giving us feedback, who just have been downloading and apparently enjoying what we have to say. Guys, we are just 3 fans like all the rest of you. We have no great special insight. We have no special genius about college basketball. We're just trying to give you all a little bit of a shared fan experience. And it has been unbelievably fun, as much fun this year as it was last year when Duke was, of course, national champions. Season 2 of the DBR podcast, in my opinion, just because we didn't win it all, just as great, just as much fun as last year. And again, thanks to you two guys for being my compadres on this. It's been really, really fabulous.
I meant to say something about that and then got myself sidetracked with reunion. But entirely what you said, it amazes me that there are as many hits on our SoundCloud page as there are. So thank you so much to all the people who listen.
Because we ain't doing nothing. We ain't doing nothing.
We're just talking. We're talking and recording.
And the best thing about it, and I think that you guys and all the people who listen share in this thank you, which is that you guys are probably the same way, I would imagine, because you're both active on the DBR forum. You both like other sports. You both have all these interests, and you both obviously like to talk because you wanted to do this project with me. I think one of the things that I, socially have to manage is the amount that I talk about my sports fandom to those who aren't necessarily interested about it. And since we started doing this, I have noticed personally a huge drop in the amount of one-sided conversations that I have with friends and family and acquaintances just about basketball or whatever it is. I now have to talk about other things because I'm like, you know what? During the basketball season, for about an hour a week, I just talk about basketball with two other guys who love basketball,
right,
like basketball as much as I do. So I'm actually, it's really great. It's a great outlet for me to just be like, this is my time when I talk about Duke basketball. And then otherwise I don't have to talk about it as much. And sometimes, for my friends who know that I do this, and who listen occasionally, they'll ask me what I think about such and such. And I'll be like, well, you can just turn on the podcast from last week. And I already said it. I put it on the internet. So in that regard, it's really fantastic. So yeah, to echo Jason, just thank you too, and thank everybody else. I expect to continue doing this for a long time. I hope that you guys are too. So
when we were starting this almost a year and a half ago, I mentioned that 90%. I read some stat that 3% of all podcasts on planet Earth, and we're talking about over 1 billion different podcasts, 93% of them don't last more than 7 episodes before they flounder. If you count our specially coded episodes like the Shane Batty episode, the 74-73 episode, I think we're 52, 53, 54 episodes in. So, we've more than passed that. We've shattered that. And, next season, if we, continue with this, once a week or, once every couple weeks, we're going to be inching closer to 100, which is something that very few podcasts ever reach. And that is thanks to one, a lot of people, I know people ask me, oh, why isn't there a podcast this week? And I'm sure a lot of you guys out there know that, there's 3 of us. This also means there's 3 different, very, very busy schedules. We all have different things going on outside of Duke basketball, which is hard to believe. seeing how much as we talk about it every week. But, it's very difficult to get three people on the same page as to when you can meet. We've done podcasts at 11:30 at night. We've done podcasts at 7 in the morning, 5 in the morning for Sam.
Yeah. Let's clarify that. It's 5 o'clock in the morning.
5 in the morning. So, and for us on the East Coast, we've been up at 1 a.m. Recording podcasts after basketball games. So it's very difficult to
editing.
Editing.
Oh my God! Sometimes I'm editing until 3 a.m.
Right.
I think Jason does it more than Donald does, but I don't exactly know what the breakdown is. But for those who don't know,
it's about 80-20. It's about 80-20.
I don't know if we ever talk about this, but Jason does like a lot of the editing. Donald does some of it, and as soon as it's over, I log off and don't know what happens until it gets posted. So you guys are Jason, you're real MVP. Donald, you're like Russell Westbrook or whatever, and I'm like Enes Kanter.
Sometimes I get triple doubles. That's cool. It's just great that you have an outlet to talk about. It's a fun project. Like, we obviously wouldn't be doing this if it wasn't fun. We're not sitting here like, guys, we really need to talk about Duke basketball. How do we do this and make it sound entertaining? This, like, you guys are getting us in our natural element, talking about a team that we love just as much as you guys out there do. So thank you guys, you two, for giving me an outlet to kind of talk about Duke basketball, to vent about Carolina, and other things in related to college basketball, a subject that I would be talking about anyway. I just wouldn't be recording it. And it's good to talk with two guys that have become good friends, and I've actually gotten to meet both of them over the course of this. When we started this, we had not met each other, which is also something that is very rare when it comes to podcasting.
And
but
also awkward. It's so awkward the first time we talked.
Yeah, exactly. I want you guys. That's a good thing. I think in this next week, if everyone listens to this podcast, go back and take a listen to that very first ever podcast.
Please.
And just see how much we've improved from then to now. Like, it's light years, compared to when we first started. But thank you guys for being a part of this, and letting me be a part of this, and thank you guys out there for quote unquote, keeping us on the air so long. If you guys didn't listen, we would probably have stopped this a long time ago. But for some reason, you guys tune in week after week, episode after episode, and we cannot thank you enough for it.
Amen. Well, guys, we were talking the inconvenience on our lives and trying to get things together. We've been on for over an hour now, and I'm getting the high sign from my wife. So I'm going to wrap things up for us. Gentlemen, Sam Klein, Donald Wine, thank you again for joining me. Fans out there, thank you so much for listening in. That is it for this episode of the DBR podcast. The season is done. We are officially very, very much in the off season. If there's major news, we'll try and get back out here and talk to you about it. If not, we'll find time over the next few months, maybe to bring you some special guests like we did last year when we got Shane Battier, we got Chris Collins, we got Wojo. Did we get Wojo? No, we didn't get Wojo. Not yet. I think I've been working hard on Wojo. That's why I had it in my head. We got Nolan Smith. We had a great off season. We'll try and do that for you again this season. But that's it for now. I am Jason Evans, this week's host for Sam and Donald. Thanks again. Duke Band, take us home.
The golden age of travel is back in the Palm Beaches. As America's first resort destination, the Palm Beaches are the gentler side of Florida, waiting just for you. From Jupiter to Boca Raton, sun-kissed sands embrace the warm Gulf Stream waters. Our vibrant blend of people, cultures, and coastal towns welcome everyone. So we invite you to join us. Experience the original, the one, the only, the Palm Beaches. Plan your trip at thepalmbeaches.com.